My name is Jamie King. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Kind of grew up like northeast of the U District. I've left for extended periods of time, but this is pretty much always been my home base. Wanted to get out, but just never could. And I think I'm stuck here now. Growing up in Seattle, I don't know. I mean, everybody asks me the same question, like, well, has it changed? And it's like, yeah, but you kind of change with it in a way. So, I mean, there's probably a lot more cars on the road than there was when I was like a little kid, but I don't know. It's like, yeah, of course it's changed, It felt like a bit more like Portland, like kind of working class, but also kind of hippie, weird city. And it's, the tech stuff and the money and the Teslas and all that stuff. It's just, it's different for sure. But you can't really mourn that too much, It's got to keep on going. But I don't know. I had a pretty what felt to me like pretty regular, blue collar family, North Seattle, nominally Catholic. I had an older brother and sister, quite a bit older than me. I think they were in like junior high when I was born. I was the little baby boy that came kind of late. Yeah, dad was a landscaper. Mom, worked worked at daycares and was a nurse's aide and a cook and did hair and stuff like that. I think my first exposure to tattoos was probably my grandpa. My grandparents lived just a couple blocks up the road from my parents, and they had a swimming pool at their house, which was pretty awesome when you were a little kid. And my grandpa, he'd served in the Pacific during World War II, so he was a Marine. Ended up getting this USMC Bulldog tattoo on his arm, and I just remember being, pretty fascinated with it as a little kid, always asking him to see it. At one point I remember him saying, like, just asking him about it, because, he wasn't really the rebel type or what I associated with people getting tattoos, but, military, and he basically said, like, well, a lot of us, we were all going over there and all the guys were getting them, and I figured a lot of us wouldn't be coming back, so, I guess I'll get a tattoo. From there, my older brother, I think out of high school, like in his early 20s, started getting quite a few tattoos at the shop in the U District called Mind's Eye that was actually still there up until about probably 10 or 12 years ago. But he lived at home for a lot of the time that I was a little kid, so I remember him coming home with these fresh tattoos, and it was just like, blew my mind that you could even do that, and it was like pretty 90s, like the stuff that was popular at the time. Like he got some of those like Posada, like Day of the Dead art skeletons, and like some Celtic knot work, and like some kind of like Southwesty tribal stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It was cool though. And it's that kind of older brother syndrome, to where it's like you kind of get the downstream interest of everything he was in that was cool, so like punk rock, subculture, skateboarding, tattoos, just going through my brother's record collection. So he was pretty influential, I guess, for kind of the doors that opened for me to get into tattooing, pretty directly and also indirectly. Yeah, I was a pretty artistic kid. My dad had like gone to art school, and he definitely always encouraged that in me. I can remember we'd like, sit at the dinner table, and we'd have like kind of, not like a drawing class, but I'd like tell him to draw stuff, and just weird shit I'd think up, like G.I. Joes or X-Men or something, and he would draw it, and I would try to draw it, and he would like help me with mine. And my dad, it was interesting because he was very talented artistically, like he could really paint his ass off, but he had a family, so he ended up pretty much doing manual labor his whole life. And it's the nobler thing, I guess, than just insisting on being a creative, I don't know. I mean, you could argue for or against that, but something I think about sometimes. Me as a kid, I don't know. I mean, I was a kid, so I don't remember a ton of it. Um, yeah, I spent a lot of time with my grandma and grandpa, because I would go over there after school because both my parents would be at work. And up until a certain age, I don't think they really wanted me to like be home alone too much. Um, so yeah, I was around grandma and grandpa a lot, hanging out at their house. Um, they were pretty old school, kind of all-American couple from North Dakota. She was a waitress at a diner. They met when he was, coming out of the war, service in the war. Had 3 kids. He, was going to engineering school, GI Bill, put him through college, all that stuff. Ended up working for a big geotechnical firm, became vice president of the company, retired with a Rolex and a Mercedes and $1 million in the bank, so he did well for himself, and very, American dream type of material, Um, so, yeah, I don't know. I guess pretty creative kid. I was pretty into animals. I was always rescuing little squirrels and birds and stuff from the backyard, bringing cats home, probably super annoying to my parents. I don't think I was a mean kid. I definitely was like, would get into some shit here and there, but I don't know. Yeah, I think the only thing I could really keep my attention on for like long periods of time was drawing, I was a kid of the 80s and 90s, so, I wanted to be like a karate black belt and a Navy SEAL all at the same time, so you kind of you grow up watching all these movies, like Bloodsport and Predator, and I mean, all the shit I probably shouldn't be watching when I was 8 years old, but I was. So I guess being a creative kid, I would draw this stuff a lot. I was always drawing superheroes and like muscle men and like, samurais and karate guys and all that kind of stuff. So, I sometimes think about, well, the other day I was thinking about how it's interesting that, tattooing, it's almost like this blend of like the machismo, like this very kind of male armor that you wear with, the creative kind of visual process. And just thinking back to like, what attracted me as a little kid. So that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't like a super into sports kind of kid. I mean, I would play, but I like wasn't as good or as invested as a lot of other people. I played like some hockey and some roller hockey as a kid for a few seasons. I did get into skateboarding pretty heavily, which became kind of a window to a lot of other things, a lot of good music. Yeah, hanging out with the public school kids because I was a private school kid. And just exposure at a young age. Looking back, it's like, man, what the hell was I doing? Just like taking drugs and sneaking out of the house, and just like, it's this momentum you gather, and it's like, you just kind of go further and further and further. So I remember around the time, I think I was 13, and it was Halloween. My older brother was still living at home at the time, and Halloween night, he died actually behind the wheel, drunk driving. So yeah, he was driving north on 35th, where it connects to Lake City Way, and I don't know if he passed out or fell asleep at the wheel, but he rear-ended a guy. He had this like shitbox old Subaru from the 80s, and it just like fell apart. He was a big dude, former football player, so probably dead upon impact. But something like that, man, it really rattles a family. He was like, the firstborn son, and kind of, I love my parents, but I don't think I had a lot of like respect for them growing up, not a lot of boundaries and consequences, kind of, well-intentioned, but kind of looser, more friend parents, kind of hippie style, and I think for a kid like me that maybe wasn't the most effective thing, and but I did have an older brother, that could get me to do, what they couldn't. So, I would say I definitely went off the rails after that. I was kind of flirting with some of these darker sides of life, skateboarding, getting into punk rock, not really as into school and stuff. I was definitely already on that trajectory, but I think I was kind of hanging on by a couple threads. And then it was like once a big tragedy like that happens, it's like everybody in the family's kind of fending for themselves. And, I probably really needed some structure and some boundaries, and, I wasn't going to get it. So pretty much went off the rails. I was kind of out of my parents' hands. I don't even know what I got in trouble for first. I think it was just sneaking out, doing graffiti, just dumb shit around the neighborhood, like the mini mart on the corner and like the Red Apple on 35th, and just like shit my parents would have seen, you know what I mean? And then they'd see me writing it in my notebook. It's like, I can't even, thinking back now, like what an idiot. But yeah, so that, again, that kind of gathered its own momentum, and it's like, I had already gotten charged with this one thing, and then started failing some urinalysis that was part of my probation, and then it was just like I just got deeper in the hole. And I won't bore you with the details of that because it's probably pretty average, but I ended up getting put away for a while, on and off, but put away for a few months at one point, sent to drug treatment, and kind of got it together. I think I'd had enough at the time. And, I think all that settled by the time I was like 16 or 17. I got off, any kind of probation, and things had kind of settled down for me. From there, I don't know, it's like, I think I knew I couldn't work like a regular job. I'd worked with my dad, doing landscaping, doing manual labor. I'd worked at like a bagel place. I worked as a dishwasher, just like odd teenage kid jobs. But, I was kind of into this punk rock, kind of graffiti, kind of skinhead, skateboarding world. And I was the kid who could draw really good. So it was just kind of like, 1 + 1 makes 2. It's like, well, I'm going to be a tattooer. So my first tattoo I actually got when I was 13 years old. And I had just found this guy Yushi, that was like tattooing all the punk rockers and skinheads around Seattle. And I just, I was determined to get tattooed, and again, it was right after my brother died. So I got his initials on me. And from there, man, it was just like, as soon as I realized all I needed was like 50 or $100 and I could get tattoos, it was like, by the time I was 16, I was like pretty covered in tattoos. And I cringe thinking about it now, but so yeah, again, it's that urge I had to get them. As soon as I found an outlet for it, I definitely chased it. So I knew I wanted to be a tattooer. I think it was just finding an inroad. At one point, I was still living at home, and I thought like going to art school might be the thing for me. I ended up getting into this local art school, got, some scholarship money and all this stuff. And I was working at a record store at the time just to, make a little dough. And man, about a month into art school, it was just like, this is not for me. And I don't know what I don't know if I thought it was going to be different from all the regular school that I was just incapable of doing for the past like 18 years, but it was not. It was just more school. All I really wanted to do was learn how to draw better, and I had to sit through these weird video classes and all this liberal arts stuff. And, meanwhile, I was going to have to pay back all this money, and it just did not make sense. Around that time, I was in a recovery program, a 12-step program. My sponsor at the time, I'm going to break some anonymity here by saying this, I don't think he'll mind, a guy named Damon Conklin. I'd been coming around for a while. He'd seen me, knew I'd gotten some sobriety under my belts. And he had lost his counter help at the time, another, such drug addict type, who was kind of, out doing something. And I walked into a meeting one night, and Damon saw me, and he just was like, hey, Jamie, you want to come work in my tattoo shop a few days a week? And it was like, man, it was like the moment I'd been waiting for my entire life. So there were a couple weeks there where I kind of tried to do it all. I had a record store job and I had art school and I was trying to be at the tattoo shop, and I think I lasted about a month. I quit art school, quit the record store. I was still living with my folks, so I could kind of live on almost nothing. And I was just at the tattoo shop as much as I could be. They didn't really make me like any promises of an apprenticeship. I mean, they knew I wanted to be a tattooer, but I was just happy to be there. You know, that's kind of the way. It's like this uncertain hope, I guess. And again, I was 18, so I could afford some uncertainty and just the environment, just being around tattoos and these older dudes, you know, was awesome to me. So I think after about 6 months to a year, they kind of agreed that I could be, you know, something like an apprentice. Yeah, so that was like 2002, 2003. His shop on Capitol Hill was called Super Genius. This was probably like the first iteration of that shop. There's been many since, you know, iterations that have come to pass. You know, it was a weird situation with the apprenticeship there, because it was pretty loose thinking back on it. And it's funny, I find myself being kind of full of it sometimes, because I'll tell these people that want to get into tattooing, like, oh, you got to do this proper apprenticeship. It's like, I feel like so many tattooers do this. It's like, you got to do this proper apprenticeship and do it the right way. And it's like, I mean, I kind of did. Like, I was in a shop and I had some supervision and I was kind of under the banner of a shop, but like, I didn't really have anybody helping me that much. It was kind of like they would let me tattoo my friends after hours, and then I could like get them to come back in the next day and kind of show it to the guys. And so again, I wasn't totally out there, you know, kitchen wizard style, but I was definitely like, it was a bit of a free range kind of apprenticeship. But you know, eventually that stuff got good enough that they kind of turned me loose on walk-ins. I think I did about a year and a half there. There was a guy there, Matt Areola, who was probably like the closest thing to a teacher I had there. He bought another shop, and I went to work for him there, a shop called Liberty, and it was in its original location on 50th and University. Yeah, so, you know, I think first couple years of tattooing, you know, you kind of start making money like you've never really made before in your life. And one interesting thing about tattooing is that it kind of affords you some other interests and hobbies. And, you know, I was like a chubby little kid growing up. So I think at some point in like my late teen years, early 20s, I got pretty passionate about like working out and lifting weights and stuff like that. So I think tattooing kind of opened up a pathway for me to like pursue that pretty seriously, you know, once I got done with my apprenticeship and everything. And I did. I got pretty involved in like competitive powerlifting. I mean, probably from the time I was like 21, 22 on. You know, unfortunately, like looking back now, I think my tattooing kind of suffered in many ways because of that. Also, my body suffered. I mean, what comes along with that, you know, not always, but at least for me was, you know, the use of performance-enhancing drugs. You know, you're putting crazy loads on your body, eating crazy amounts of food, just in the gym all the time. And, you know, I think I was kind of phoning it in on tattooing for quite a few years during that time. I mean, I was still getting better just as a natural process of the time put in. But, you know, yeah, just going down to this dungeon gym in downtown Seattle 3 or 4 nights a week and squatting and bench pressing and deadlifting with all these guys. I mean, it was awesome. The gym's actually still over there. It's called Seattle Strength and Power, and it's literally like a dungeon. It's underneath the Virginia building on 2nd Avenue. And this guy, Todd, he still trains people over there. There's like strongman and powerlifting and all this stuff. So anyway, about 8 or 9 years into that, you know, while still tattooing, I ended up getting hurt pretty bad at a competition. I had like a disc injury in my spine. And, you know, I had started to kind of have some issues here and there. And I kind of always told myself, you know, like I'm going to do this until my body tells me I need to stop, you know, and then I'll figure something else out. And so it did, you know. I was at this meet in Portland and I got under the bar. You know, when you get under for like a competition squat where you wrap your knees pretty tight with this, like, you know, it's just a knee wrap. Gives you like some stability and some support when you come out of the hole in the squat. And my knee wrap came unraveled when I was walking up to the bar. I was getting called up because you have a certain amount of time to squat the weight. And so I walk up, knee wrap comes unraveled, clock's ticking. My handler, my buddy Ricky's like rewrapping my knee as fast as he can. So I, you know, just in the nick of time, I get under the bar, I bury the squat. In the bottom of the squat, I feel this pop in my low back, and I barely finished the squat. I mean, it was so slow. I grinded it out and was able to re-rack the bar, but it was like I was fucked up, you know. And your adrenaline's going, so you don't really, you know, I could still walk, and like I finished the day. I finished my lifts that day barely, but it was like it was rough after that. So long road of recovery and just issues from that. And I think what really happened there, something shifted in my tattooing from that injury. And it was pretty apparent to me that like, okay, well, I can't like screw around in the gym like I've been doing for the past, like, you know, 7 or 8 years. I think it might be time to take my tattooing a little more seriously. And so figuring out what that looked like, you know, I think at the time, you know, I was, you know, my background was pretty like American traditional. It shifted to a bit more of like the illustrative. I was doing a lot of like pretty heavy metal and like Viking influenced stuff, kind of Greg Irons influenced. And it, you know, it lent itself to a very kind of illustrative style that kind of came naturally to me, just my drawing background. Like the drawing aspect is something that I never really struggled with as much as some other guys. So I don't know. I somehow had this revelation that I need to start doing traditional Japanese tattoos, and I think having kind of learned from 2 guys, Joel Kennedy and Matt Areola, that, you know, that was kind of part of their repertoire. I had seen like the amount of work and research that they had to put in to do that. So it was kind of like this thing that you didn't really approach until you were at a certain level. You know, it was kind of like the varsity team or something of tattooing. And this was I was probably like 9 or 10 years into tattooing. And at the time, there weren't really a whole ton of people in Seattle doing large traditional Japanese tattoos. It was like, I mean, Aaron Bell, of course. I think Levi was here at that point. But yeah, so there was a bit of a, you know, hole in the market in some ways, or maybe. So I don't know. I just started getting books and studying. And it was weird, you know. It was like people would kind of know me for this one thing, and then it's like, I always say it's like trying to turn a steamship around when you're like, oh, psych, I'm doing this now. You know, just want to do koi fish and Hanyu masks. So that was difficult. It probably took 2 or 3 years to kind of like, you know, you have all this momentum built up in this one way from these like former projects you're doing, and kind of starting the new ones, and, you know, and starting new ones at a discounted rate in some cases, because you just want to get kind of essentially a new portfolio built up. So that was kind of, I think, humbling at like almost, you know, 10 years into your trade, wanting to do this whole other thing and kind of starting from scratch with it. I mean, I wasn't totally starting from scratch because I had a baseline of clients, but not all my clients wanted that kind of stuff, you know? So yeah, I don't know, you know, I will say, doing traditional Japanese tattoos is, I'm very self-conscious of my place in it, you know, what my place is and what my place is not, you know. I mean, I know I am a Westerner, so there's an element of, you know, sort of like total authenticity that I'll really never have. I'm really just, it's mimicry in a lot of ways, you know. But, you know, it's interesting because we live in a time of so much information and access to reference and things like that really I didn't even have in, like, when I started, 20 some years ago, 21 years ago. So you don't really need a master or a person. It's not like you're replicating the style of your forebears. It's like you can tattoo like, Horiyoshi 2 or Horiyoshi or Horitoshi or, whoever, you find their book, you look at their Instagram, and you make that your thing and your style. And it's like there's so many sub-styles within styles. So, I think one part of doing traditional Japanese tattoos is like you got to go to Japan, So going there, the imagery, all the stuff that's so exotic and foreign to us, this sort of stuff of the Far East that we become really enamored with. It is obviously very woven into their just their visual kind of catalog of what's around them, So that's cool, the temples and all this stuff. There's lots of Shinto and like esoteric Buddhist stuff that's really like, the land is kind of laden with all that. But I think what's more interesting for me is just like, I think the cultural stuff from going over there, and just the observations about tattooing and the society that produced this type of tattooing. And there is a very like subterranean aspect to traditional Japanese tattooing that it's a lot more private, whereas traditional American, it's very geared towards like, look at me, it's very individualistic, very loud, very like, to set yourself apart. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think there's that aspect of privacy and, tattooing being so stigmatized and penalized in Japan for so long. It kept it kind of underground and kept it kind of, I think, honest in a lot of ways. Horiyoshi talks about this in way better way than I could. So that's cool, and it's changed my view, I think, as I've gotten older, just about, I don't, and here I am with my hands and neck and even my face tattooed, but I'm like, now I'm just like, I don't know, I like the idea of tattoos being more to be enjoyed privately and almost for yourself, that they don't have to be this kind of exhibitionist thing. If they are, that's fine, I kind of, there's more allure to me to someone that like can put on the suit, go sign papers at the bank and kind of blend in, but then when it's time to like, kind of bear that, remove that veil that society makes us put on, and you can kind of bear this armor, against your skin, I think is kind of cool. So not to, make it sound too dramatic, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just, I'm grateful to have gotten into tattooing in the time I did, early 2000s, because I think, I think it was like, I was just on the other side of this era that was passing, and a new one was coming in. It was like, I think it was like, that was the year before the TV shows came out, like Miami Ink and all that stuff. I remember Kat even came and worked at that first shop I was at, and she was talking about how Garver had invited her to be on Miami Ink. It was like just coming out. And it's really blown up, and in some ways I'm kind of riding the wave, and I can commiserate, about how like, oh, it's so lame now, and there's so many people tattooing, and it's just like, it's not just like bikers and weird, eccentric, alternative people anymore. And like, that's all true, and I get it. And I've been there, and I've done that kind of mourning too. But at the same time, man, it's like, you got to earn a living. You know what I'm saying? The current state of tattooing, I don't know. It's just, I think I got into tattooing out of a love affair with tattoos. Tattoos had this kind of primal power to me that I could not always really articulate. It's just like this, it's just this magnetic energy that draws you in. And I was going to find a way to do it. I was going to find a way to make that my job. And it was almost like thinking of that as like a career was like a side effect of it. Like I knew it could be a career, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a tattooer and have this great life and get medical insurance and, be able to raise a family, all the things I care about now. But it was just a non-issue. And I think you're seeing more people in it that it's like, probably didn't go that way for them. They're kind of more into tattooing as kind of just another outlet for art or just like a job. And also they maybe didn't enter tattooing through some sort of like subculture or dark side of life. You know what I mean? These might be people that like have college degrees and like, played largely by the rules through a lot of their life. And like 10 or 15 years ago when tattoos were more stigmatized than they are now, they might not have gotten a lot of these tattoos, So I think it's been kind of housebroken. And with that, you're sort of seeing this like, gentrification is a very like overused word, but it's kind of like this gentrifying of everything that we're seeing at large, So again, like I know I sound like this like old tattooer on a soapbox about how tattooing has changed so much, and what are you gonna do, man? Just like do your work the best you can, be nice to people, be honest with people, be better than the next guy. Yeah, there's a ton of private studios. Everybody's doing the private studio thing. Nobody wants to use coil machines anymore. I get it, because I come from this old school kind of like, loud, like saloon door, coil machine, smoking cigarettes, like during business hours kind of tattoo shop. But then like, I've also tried to kind of move myself into something more sophisticated, and I had a private studio for like 5 years and it was awesome, and I use a stupid fucking pen now to tattoo on people with a little battery. And so I don't know. You just, you find a way to push your craft forward in some way. And what that looks like in your life takes different forms,
Is there a certain value in how tattooing used to be that you think needs to be remembered? Or about the experience?
Yeah. I think there is a value in how tattooing used to be. I think we're in this time of culturally and politically of overcorrection, and it's people reacting to the other. And I think on the one hand, you have people that can kind of over romanticize and over glorify our forebears, whether it's like Sailor Jerry or fucking George Washington, and then you have people that just want to completely erase them, and see them as these just misogynistic villains, which like in some ways maybe they were, I don't know, but it's like we kind of have to accept. I think there's a value in accepting the past on its own terms and not putting it through like a very specifically modern lens that we might view. And it's like, yeah, Sailor Jerry was probably like pretty racist, probably pretty average and normal for like a World War II vet, like career Navy guy of his time. You know what I mean? He also, had great, strong relationships with tattooers in Japan, and he's the only reason we have a lot of that stuff. So it's like you have to take the whole person, I think, and don't put them on this romanticized pedestal, but don't think that you can just like discard everything. It's like have some gratitude also. So I think that's important. I think so. In short, to answer that, I think like, yeah, there are some things about like tattooing that we've lost along the way that I think are important. And I think it's just up to each person to try to maintain that as best they can, whether that's, for some people that's going to look like, having a bunch of motorcycles parked out front and people smoking cigarettes in the back, that's fine. Might not be everybody's flavor. And for some people, it might be like, finding a real Harishi in Japan to get like a Tabori tattoo from and having that whole experience. It's like those authentic, as much as that's an overused word, experiences are still there. You just gotta find them and try to create them as a tattooer. As far as tattooing being a sacred thing, like maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it can be lowbrow and trashy too. Or it can be really sophisticated and it can be really beautiful. I think the sacredness in tattooing lies more in just the sort of the kind of human interaction and like the struggle that our clients go through. It's like this process and this journey is the destination kind of thing. And these relationships we develop with our clients that they keep getting tattooed for years and years and years and are working their way towards a bodysuit. And I think, you see like these people getting like the anesthesia for the tattoos, and it's like this, you're kind of circumventing that whole process by doing that. And that's sort of another cultural pattern we're in, is people want, they want the thing without having to go through the process of getting it. They want the social credit of being the heavily tattooed guy, but they don't want to go through these hours of pain, and I get it. I don't either, yeah, guide me, give me something else. How am I doing?
How long have you been tattooing Japanese at this point?
I guess I've been doing like primarily Japanese, close to a decade, traditional Japanese tattoos. Yeah, again, there was this kind of weird in-between point where I was still finishing a lot of old stuff and just trying to kind of get people on board and trying to reestablish a portfolio. Yeah, I guess it's been about 10 years. I don't know, because in Japan, it's definitely like, there still is that association with like organized crime and stuff like that. So people tend not to be as like, exhibitionist about their tattoos. Here in the States, I don't know, man. It's people from all walks of life, I mean, a lot of my clients are pretty like blue collar dudes, a lot of firefighters, a lot of electricians. Yeah, I definitely think people don't approach traditional Japanese with the reverence that I think they should, and I'm not trying to turn it into some kind of golden calf. I mean, it's nothing more than an artistic style. But I think there's something of a formula involved, and you can, there's room within that formula. But I think people really just kind of make it up as they go. And I think within tattooing, there are like well-established things that work and do not work, and you have to be kind of willing to submit yourself to what's been kind of worked out, previously by your forebears, And once you learn that, like there's a lot of room, there's flexibility with that, and you can kind of build a style, but I do think there's validity in like, having someone that's more advanced than you that can kind of like guide you through things, asking questions, yeah, because a lot of us are just looking at the internet and books, a lot of us don't really have like a master or a teacher, like I had some people I could bounce things off of, but no like one person that I was like emulating, which is a thing we're disconnected from here in the West, you know what I mean? Like we're just phoning it in with like the best materials we can. So yeah.
Let's catch up to your current state. Just what you have going on now, what you see for the future, just life now that you've been in tattooing for this amount of time. How it's changed you as a person.
Yeah. I guess one thing I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention was, I think around 10 years of tattooing, I met this girl that was another tattooer living in San Francisco, and her name was Hannah, and We were married for about 6 years. I'm fast forwarding through a lot of the story. I was living in Seattle. She was living in San Francisco. We did the long distance thing for a while. She ended up moving up to Seattle. Just things got going quick, and we got married after a while. We were married for like 6 years, and she ended up getting cancer. And this was all during COVID. It was a crazy time. Her prognosis was not looking good. So she ended up, in the midst of COVID, people couldn't really fly. The world was super weird. I was freaking out, trying to figure out how we were going to pay our bills. She ended up going home to Sweden, because that's where she was from. After a while, I ended up flying over there when I could. I had to bring all this paperwork with me to prove I was who I said I was, and had to take all these tests and all the stuff. But yeah, man, I don't know. That was a pretty crazy experience. She ended up, after about a year of me going back and forth there, she passed away in 2021. And that was nuts, So she was in her early 40s. So she was a couple years older than me, but super talented tattooer, man. In a complete view, a much more technically well-rounded tattooer than I was, I had my things I could do, but overall, very well-trained, very thoughtful, very technically precise tattooer. So yeah, again, death kind of turns everything upside down, man. The tattoo community was very supportive through that whole thing. We definitely couldn't have had our life. She couldn't have moved back to Sweden, had a place to live. All the things we were able to do was pretty much because of tattooing, and I think it's amidst all that tragedy, people, we really do take care of each other, man, because it's we kind of are this world within the world, and a lot of us, it's kind of this pirate thing, where it's a lot of us don't have health insurance, and a lot of us don't have a big retirement. So it's when something happens to someone, it's you know what to do. You go hit that GoFundMe, or you give what you can, or whatever, and it is pretty cool, So yeah. Anyway, so that was fairly recently, and just coming back from that, trying to get my life back together. I had a private studio through that whole process that allowed me to kind of come back from Sweden and do my clients, and had a couple other guys that worked there with me, but I ended up closing that. It was down in the city, and just logistically got kind of hard to run it. Now I have a shop that I co-own with another guy. It's a bit more of a walk-in street shop, a little bit outside Seattle. Which is, it's a different thing for me, because in many ways, I should say in some ways, it feels like a step backwards, because it's not always the type of thing it isn't completely congruent with where I've tried to take my tattooing. But, there's this part of me where it's well, that's kind of where I came from. It's this more walk-in, kind of traditional, more blue-collar, kind of working class kind of environment, and clientele. So I love the people, I love the energy of that kind of shop. We have a great crew. Yeah, so I'm just, I'm very fortunate in taking it as it comes. I think at some point I probably will try to work privately again. I'm just trying to kind of get all my ducks in a row. Currently, I am remarried to a very awesome girl named Heidi, who does hair. Yeah, so life nowadays is pretty normal, man. It's pretty nice, and I'm pretty grateful. It's pretty structured. I have a bunch of dogs. I just got a new puppy that's keeping me up all night right now. I have a wife who loves to cook and be home, and she takes really good care of me, and it's awesome. Better than I deserve, for sure. I get up early. I work out. yeah, it's pretty much just day in and day out, man. So, yeah, it's funny. It's like all the things you're trying to run away from when you're a young man, you end up kind of like, in a roundabout way, recreating, you know, just trying to get stability in a career like tattooing, you know, after all is said and done. It's an interesting process, you know. So I think, yeah, there are some realities of tattooing that I think are worth acknowledging. And, you know, they're pretty self-evident, but, you know, I think people think of it as this dream job, and like in many ways it is. It's like it can be very magical and very cool, and you get to be your own boss and like do cool art and listen to rock and roll all day, and like that's cool, but it's like, you know, it is a struggle, you know, for years and years, and it's like if you're not saving your money and like storing away when, you know, the land is given fat, then like when it gets thin, it's like you're gonna be stressing, man. And we've seen, you know, post-COVID, stuff really blew up for tattooing. It was like we saw this big economic boom. You know, a lot of new tattooers, a lot of private studios open, people spending money, happy to get back to work, and then a big drop off. You know, and this past year we've just seen a lot of people sweating, a lot of people quitting tattooing, a lot of people, like a lot of shops closing. And I don't, you know, I'm not like applauding that. I'm not like, you know, I don't like to see anyone like, you know, lose what they worked for. But yeah, you know, it's a bit of a culling in a way, and I don't think that's bad really, because we were kind of, you know, tattooing had gotten kind of bloated, and it is still kind of bloated, you know. I think probably at least a third of people tattooing could fall off, and we'd be fine. It's like people would still get tattooed, you know. So yeah, you know, just be real about it if you want to be a tattooer. Get tattooed by good people, you know. Read books, go to conventions. You know, you got to treat it like a job. It is a blue collar job. You know, we're not actually rock and roll stars. We're like brain surgeons. I'm sorry. You know, you got to show up on time, have your drawings ready, be nice to your clients, you know, and just put in hours and work, and that's what it is, you know. So, I mean, you can do okay, you can have a good life, for sure, and make it work for you in the way you want to, but it's like you do have to treat it like a job, you know. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man.